Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Waking Up Cerberus here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. I'm Suzanne Sherman. Joining me in the studio today are the founders of our network here, Daniel Bailey and Jeff Johnson. I'll be bringing them in momentarily. Want to remind you to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We have a fan page. Please consider joining that as well. It is CRN fan page. You can find us there. During the show, you can always send me messages. Follow me on Facebook as well. Suzanne Sherman and the Suzanne Sherman's Wasatch Report radio show. You can get hold of me anytime. I will also respond to messages that you send to me during the show. Those are always fun to get. We also have a YouTube page. We have a live chat going. I believe Jeff Johnson's going to be monitoring that, and a SoundCloud page. So if you miss the live airing of our shows, you can always download those. Please share, follow, subscribe, tell your friends. Social media wizards ain't going to do it for us. Our reach is abysmal. When we hear people, I talk to people about our radio show and they say, gee, I didn't know you had a radio show. Well, holy cow, you're on my friends list, but they're just not getting the messages out. When they do hear, they love it and they share. This is what we need. We have to do this. If people are going to hear a message, it's going to be because our followers and our listeners share the information. Thank you so much for those that do. And we so appreciate all the great feedback we are getting. We have a Radio Co. loop. You can click to an app. I think there's a link to that right on our pages as well. We have content going 24/7. We have Mark and Suzanne show, Revolutionizing Radio. Mark is on the road today. Otherwise, he was going to join us to discuss our State of the Union address that we listened to last night. Some listened, some did not. We also have episodes of the Wasatch Report. I'm still going to be doing those, but this is kind of a fun thing we're doing this morning, and we're trying to have a regular AM show with all of our hosts here. So this isn't just the Wasatch Report. We have Liberty Minutes with Greg Junkbond Carpenter, also Case in Point and Fundamentals of Federalism, and Greg Carpenter's show, The Spy Who Loves Liberty. This stuff is all on here. You can download it from our SoundCloud. Listen at your leisure. Again, share with your friends. On Monday, Greg Carpenter and his other Army intelligence government advisor friend had a really fantastic discussion on Venezuela. President Trump mentioned Venezuela in his address last night. If you missed the State of the Union, you can hear that again, but go back and listen to the discussion we had on Venezuela. Two guys that have actually been there, understand what's going on. And this is the stuff you're not going to hear on any other source. So we encourage you to do that. Out here on the Wasatch Back, I am literally snowed in. It's not the amount of snow that's been problematic for me. It has been the drifts and the wind. I was looking out my window yesterday and it literally looked like cyclones between my house and my guest house. So I dug myself out partially with my little plow, the little plow that could. So I have some more work to do today. Anybody that's been here knows I have a driveway that goes up and down this hill. And there's a sharp turn in there, and that's where the snow accumulates. So I've got some work to do after this show. That being said, Daniel Bailey, how are you doing today out there, my friend?
Oh, I am tired, but we are dealing with about 2 inches of ice, slush, sleet, whatever this Canadian weather is bringing to me today. But if this keeps up, I will not be going anywhere tonight.
Yeah, I'm pretty much hunkered down. We actually have a lot of avalanche warnings right in the area where I live. Now, my place where I live is secure. I don't have to worry about that. But as I drive a lot on Interstate 80, I look, because we're very steep mountains through these passes here, and I just think, that snow's piling up pretty high there. And again, out in the Uintas and the western side of the Uintas, this is all the area where I live. So, again, you're all adults, do what you want, but boy, howdy, if you can stay off the roads, do so. Let's get into this. We had the State of the Empire speech last night. I'm going to analyze this detached from, as much as I can, detached from emotion, because there were some good things that were said, and there were some things that I didn't agree with. A few things are apparent to me, and you guys will chime in also, but this is my take, and I don't impute those to anybody else here on the network. Few things are apparent from listening to this. The Constitution is a dead letter. Forget it. Okay? I don't think it was mentioned once last night. I could be wrong. I did listen. I have about 8 pages of notes that I took. There's going to be no peaceful solution with the Democrat Party. Now, that being said, I am not blaming them exclusively for where we are today. In fact, I think I've been far more harsh in my criticism of the Republican Party going back to the 1860s. But we have seen a level of depravity and hatred and reprehensible behavior exhibited last night that makes it absolutely unequivocal. There is no peaceful coexistence with this contingency. The other conclusion I came up with, and this was one I've had before, but this was so in my face. There is no fixing Washington, D.C. None at all. I've said time and time again, any solutions are going to have to come from a local level. It is up to the states to assert their sovereignty and their powers and retake the powers they delegated to Washington, D.C. if we are ever to get back on track and take some of the power away from these megalomaniacs. That being said, because of the new federalism we have, where the federal government provides all these grants to the states don't want to assert themselves and give up the funding. So I don't think that's ever going to happen either. It makes for some really great discussions, but the problem is because of the depth and the success of the indoctrination, the knowledge is simply not out there. They just don't think we have it. Mark Kreslins is on the road today. We were hoping that he could join us and discuss this. Hopefully he can tomorrow. He posted a link to the Hotel California. And what do they say? Do you want to quote what he wrote there, Jeff?
Oh, I took it down. I'm sorry. Let's see. Oh, okay. Let's see. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'm sorry.
We're all just, well, he posted the YouTube link to the Hotel California. We're all just prisoners of our own device. You can check out anytime you like, and you can never leave. And that's essentially what we've come down to today. And also, you know, what we're seeing here, and I agree with him, he posted this, we're not anti-Trump. We want to make that clear. He's actually done a couple good things to lessen the federal tyranny a tiny bit. And let me expound upon that, because there were a couple things that I thought were really good. And I was not aware of this. Why? Because the media probably disagrees with this. And second, they don't want us to know that this is a good thing. He said that he eliminated the death tax for small businesses, family ranches and farms. What has been the purpose? You know, we've had these death tax where families have had a farm or a ranch or business for over 100 years. And now because of inflation, the kids who have spent their lives working on this family farm for generations of kids working on this business, now have to cough it up, sell it to pay federal income tax. This is crazy, but it's, again, part of the redistribution of wealth plan that is so crucial to the socialist society we have become. We're going to discuss this claim too, that the United States will never become a socialist nation as well as that. Jeff, do you want to contribute anything at this point? I don't want to shut you out here because we've got 3 people talking today.
Well, the only thing I was going to bring up later, and I'll bring it up later, about the way they were dressed. But yeah, so I'll let you just continue on from there.
Well, you know, it's funny because you saw the Democrats, adults, by the way, don't wear costumes to business meetings. Our good friend Andrew said that, and I want to give him credit for that. And the first thing I noticed was obviously these ladies are trying to make a point about something, and the white outfits, no, they weren't a reference to their origins in the Klan. It was actually, I guess, showing unity to the women's suffrage movement, because apparently women still feel that they're oppressed, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. But what struck me is,
my thought was
what?
Like the Klan.
Yeah, I know
exactly what they look like. And I wasn't the only one.
My notes say, where are their hoods? But then the other thing that struck me was then in comes Melania in her black outfit, looking absolutely stunning and classy compared to these women whose behavior I felt was absolutely reprehensible. What
sophomoric? Did you watch them there?
Yeah.
It was like they were sitting at a bar, having a good time over there at times, or acting so stern. it was just I don't know if you noticed what I posted as the description of the show, but it's exactly correct. I put down there the state of the nation circus, and that's what it was. It was a circus.
Well, and the other thing that struck me too, as President Trump entered the room, tell me we don't have an elected king. We have an elected monarchy with an 8-year term limit. That's about it. So, but to see, and yes, he is deserving of respect. But if you see, it just struck me as I don't think this is supposed to be the big circus that it had become. So I watched this, and I have to say I was impressed with how conciliatory he is. And I think it was masterful given the hatred rhetoric of the Democrat Party. And he has called them, I think he's put now our successor failure in their lap as far as rhetoric goes, because he's calling on them to choose between greatness or obstruction. He has a plan for the American people, bipartisan, all the American people he wants to lift up and help. And he's calling out the Democrats for their obstruction in what he's seeking to do, and justifiably so. And he even acknowledged the ladies in white for how women are faring, how they're taking up the job market. I think he said 58% of the job market is occupied by women. And he was applauding the success of women. And then he reached over across the aisle and acknowledged the ladies in white and the women that we have in the House of Congress now. And they stood up for the first time and cheered USA, USA, once it became about them, putting their little fists in the air, women's power and so forth, like they have been oppressed all these years. Let me tell you something. Women are not oppressed. We have programs lowering standards to allow them to participate in fields where they might not have the physical strength capacity to do so. We have preferential treatment hiring. California has just mandated that any private company having a certain amount of people must have one woman on the board of directors. What if there's an all-female company with an all-female board of directors? You don't see anybody saying, well, hey, you need a man on there. By the way, California, how are you going to deal with that rule and the gender issue? I don't think they thought that far. Speaking of entitled, women are the only members of society entitled to get away with murder. How are women oppressed? They can murder a viable infant up until birth, and that's okay.
Soon to be after birth.
And soon to be after birth. Yes, don't think that isn't coming. So this whole women is oppressed thing is an absolute debacle. So let me go back to my comments quick on the Constitution being a dead letter, because that really offends a lot of people. And when I say it's a dead letter, I don't say that it's outdated and that it no longer applies to modern circumstances. That's the living, breathing nonsense. That means, well, we're just going to change it by federal judiciary fiat because the people are too stupid to go on and vote for the rights and the things that the founders never anticipated, like the AR-15s, that sort of thing. What I'm saying is the Constitution is a dead letter because it's completely ignored. Did you, I don't know if you, yeah, you listened to most of it, Jeff and Daniel, I think you did this morning. Unless I missed it, I didn't hear the Constitution mentioned. And even if it was mentioned, let's discuss the goals that we're talking about. Now, a few of them are within the purview of the general government. He discussed foreign policy and trade with other nations. So yes, interacting with foreign nations is absolutely within the providence and the delegated powers of the general government. Overwhelmingly discussed was the plan for the American people. Let's see. Jobs. Go ahead.
Mike in our chat, which everyone can join if you listen on the YouTube channel, said, nah, didn't hear the Constitution mentioned last night. So he even agrees. Okay. And I didn't hear.
Okay, so I didn't miss it. Okay, so let's see. Jobs And as I go through this, I've got two other hosts. You can scroll through Article 1, Section 8, and if I'm wrong, you tell me if it's in there, and I will share a recipe for crow pie this week. Okay, jobs.
Nope.
Infrastructure. That raises an interesting point. Now, go back to James Madison's bank bonus bill. He proposed, after he capitulated on the constitutionality of the Second Bank of the United States, his flip-flop there. So, well, now that, it's precedent, don't you love that? Well, we've been doing it wrong for long enough, we're just going to accept it. Let's have profits from this bank go to investing in America's infrastructure. Roads, my roads.
Henry Clay's baby.
Yeah, Congress accepted this and said, fine, and they passed it. What did he do when that bill came to his desk? He vetoed it. He vetoed his own proposed bill. Why did he do such a thing? Because there was no constitutional amendment to authorize it. Now we just don't go through the trouble of an Article 5 convention amending the Constitution because it's too much trouble. That was the point. That was the point. It's supposed to be too much trouble. Not insurmountable like they said under the Articles, but under the Constitution it was supposed to be very difficult to modify it. And if they're going to amend it, it had to be for a reason sufficient enough that 3/4 of the states would ratify the change. So jobs, infrastructure, healthcare, cheaper prices for prescription medication. We're going to protect pre-existing conditions. Immigration, that's one that the conservatives love, because when we talk about immigration, that's a de facto acknowledgement that we are now one United States of America and not these United States of America, which each state had it up to themselves to define and defend their sovereign borders and determine who was going to live within them. Now, if there was a foreign invasion, yes, the general government would step in. That was one of the purposes, to set up a common defense. So we can get into that discussion a little bit later. We're also going to invest in cutting-edge industry. Solyndra, how'd that work? And let's see, new standards of living for the 21st century. Now, he also made the claim that we are not a socialist country and we never will be one. So
he's 100 years late.
He's way late.
About 170 years late.
And so if you
1913, you could really make the argument from there on. We were socialists from then. Yeah, I'm sure it was before that.
But Lincoln was championing that clear back in the 1840s. So was Henry Clay. They just didn't call it socialism at the time.
I want to read a comment that somebody gave me about that. I have to find it. Somebody is saying, yes, we're not quite socialists because many of the means of production are still privately owned. Tell me they are not subject to regulation by the government, complete control. Private, what does privately owned mean? Hey, I'll give you an example here. My veterinarian, this is as small and privately owned as you can get. Two veterinarians, father, son, and then the daughter-in-law runs the front desk, okay? I call in there, hey, my old dog has worms. Can you please send some to the feed store out here, some deworming medicine? Oh, you know what? Your dog hasn't been seen by us in such and such time. The federal government prohibits us from sending over this medicine to you. So here I am out here in the middle of nowhere. My veterinarian's 50 miles away, but they come through here frequently and they drop off medicines. But the federal government, which is 3,000 miles away, says we can't interact in this voluntary manner. So yes, means of production, businesses might be privately owned, but they are definitely government controlled. Please.
Well, government winners and losers.
Yes.
I mean, so they aren't privately owned. So you got Raytheon, you got Boeing, you got McDonnell Douglas, you go on and on the list. And on the left, they got their chosen corporations as well. they get special treatment. They get tax write-offs. They get everything they need to. On top of that, they get all these big, high-dollar contracts from the government that make massive profits. No, they are functions of government. And what do these legislators do? They make sure that they protect them. Did you see the article? This is an aside. Did you see the article the other day about the pharmaceutical company in Massachusetts that Massachusetts is going after about opioids?
No.
Government creates this opioid problem. They create these big pharma, and now because they're making money off what government has created, now they're going to go after them and they're going to sue them and try to take some of that money.
Oh yeah, we have that going on out here in Summit County, Utah. They're joining in a lawsuit to sue the pharmaceutical company for the opioid epidemic, the government created crisis. And here's what they say they're going to do with the booty they're going to get if they win this lawsuit, the loot. They're going to create government agencies to fight the problem. So we're going to have a government-created problem. Government is going to sue the private industry who has the product that the government is approving and allowing to be sold on the market. Government-improved medical programs and insurance companies divvy out this crap like M&Ms, all the while prohibiting the use of a plant, but I digress. And now we're going to sue the government and take the money to have more government programs. Who loses here? We the people. They don't care about us. We are merely an excuse for them to grow, expand, and profit off of the misery they create. Let me share Mark's comments, because when my notes here, when I quoted Trump, it says we are not a socialist nation. I just put what? U.S. will never be a socialist country. Here's Mark's commentary where he says, Houston, we have a problem. First, we're free hardly. Try keeping all your property, wages and property, and see how free you are. Medicare, income tax, highway transportation funds, borrowed funds to pay for Social Security, FAA or HUD, Department of Education, NIH, food stamps, SNAPs, all entitlement programs, most of what Washington, D.C. says, most of what your state legislature does. What do you think socialism is? Public education. Mandatory public education. They demand your children for at least 12 years, if not more. They're talking about compulsory pre-kindergarten now, nursery school, I think we called it. Hillary Clinton, we've got to get to these kids early. As Mark says, and I said already, we already are a socialist country. The facts and the truth are what are needed now, not cheerleading. And this is what we're seeing. This was the greatest speech ever. CNN, by the way, says the speech was a disgrace. You know why? He didn't talk about climate change. This is just so silly. You know what else he didn't talk about? Our debt. But Daniel, I'm going to let you run with this for a little bit, because I've been kind of holding court here over the show. Sorry.
Well, I did look the debt up today. Just Google search, easy Google search. We're currently just under $22 trillion. Just under. And then when you add in the unfunded liabilities as they're declared, that's another 46 trillion. So we're at just a mere 68 trillion in debt.
So there was an article, wasn't there an article, Suzanne, about they're going to add $1 trillion to the debt?
Yeah, I actually have that. What is that?
I'm not sure.
Show me the money. Come on, show me the money.
Here's the article here from Bloomberg.
Hey, I'm just trying to lighten us up a little bit this morning. We got it. This is, this is so serious, but this is a morning show. I wanted everyone to smile a little bit for a second.
Okay, well, mission accomplished. If you want to see blathering nitwits laughing, go to Fox and Friends. Let's see. But I do know that we do tend to stay on the dark side here and be a little negative. So that's why I said I'm trying to analyze this from a detached position. But there are some inconvenient truths that no matter what, yes, we are marching towards a socialist nation. We are a nation. We are absolutely inverted from the vision that the founders saw for our future and that the ratifying states consented to. So let me go over it now. As you mentioned, the U.S. Treasury is set to borrow $1 trillion for a second year to finance the deficit. Now, what was also omitted completely in last night's speech was any mention of our deficit. So that was not mentioned, nor was climate change, okay? The U.S. Treasury Department is set to maintain elevated sales of long-term debt to finance the government's widening budget deficit, with new issuance projected to top $1 trillion for a second straight year. He did talk about his tax cuts, but the problem is we had no corresponding spending cuts. Going back to the article, many strategists at the primary dealer firms predict that this Wednesday's quarterly refunding announcement will see the Treasury maintain note and bond sales at high record levels. They have boosted them in recent months. So you can read the article. It's on Bloomberg. We can post it. We heard a lot of talk about how the economy is booming. Jobs are up. Again, the economy's booming. Everything's great. How great can an economy be when the whole thing is built on a system of fiat currency? I'm not an economist, but can somebody please explain this to me, how we can have a booming economy with all this time, decades of quantitative easing, the Federal Reserve, yet everything is super. There's an elephant in the room, the 500-pound gorilla, whatever you want to call it, and nobody is ready for it. How many people do you know are actually prepared to deal with a financial crisis, hyperinflation of epic proportions? This is a matter not of if, but when. And I'll tell you what, this is one of the reasons I live the lifestyle I do. It might not be as convenient. Yes, I'm snowed in right now. I'm looking at the snow coming down. But you know what? When this situation happens, if not in my time, at least my progeny will have a place to go where there is food, where it's defensible, where we will have water. We might not have electricity. How many people have really prepared for this? Preparing for an economic crisis, personal or national or international, is something everybody should be doing. Anybody want to weigh in?
I was reading the comments. There's a discussion going on.
I think Daniel's reading the conversation in the live chat, which is lively, and our good friend Mark Kreslins has joined the chat while he's traveling.
Yay! What is Mark saying now?
Oh, he doesn't want to be part of this union anymore. Surprise, surprise, because that's kind of the way we all feel.
Well, and that's what I did. I
didn't work.
Succeeded leaving California and not having a federal income tax liability right now. But guess what? They're still bugging me. I told you I moved out here into the middle of nowhere, and I've got some guys from Utah Department of Conservation. If you go up the food chain high enough, it goes straight to the EPA, wanting to inspect my creek and what to tell us locals in our little community if we can pipe an irrigation ditch through here. I said, I don't recall voting for you. And here are the feds. Here are the feds sending me in the mail the American Community Survey. stating under federal law, I have to answer this truthfully. I've mentioned this on the shows before. I've got to tell them how many toilets I have, how I heat my house, whether or not anybody spent 3 or more consecutive nights in my home. You don't believe me? Go and look it up. American Community Survey. You go on the internet, you find it, Google it. It is right there. The whole thing is on a PDF, and you can see the intrusive, invasive questions, including, can you dress yourself? What do you think now they are looking for? They never ask about firearms, but there are certain red flag questions that are going to trigger deeper inquiry into your personal life. Particularly now we have bipartisan support. When we hear the word bipartisan support, grab your ankles, folks. Bipartisan support for extreme risk protection orders. President Trump, first we get the guns, then we worry about due process. So while everybody's cheering on what a remarkable speech this is, bear in mind a little bit of reality here. We are one nation, indivisible. Try not living with these lunatics who showed their true colors last night. I have never seen such rude, despicable behavior. By the way, this was the same class of clowns that held the House hostage by having their sit-in. Remember when they sat in on the Senate, on the House floor to demand gun control like a bunch of nursery school brats? They should have been expelled from the Senate, and they had every lawful reason and ability to do so, but the Republicans did nothing. What do they say when you're raising a toddler? Ignore or do not tolerate temper tantrums? Yet we do. Going back to the debt, what do you think is the biggest cause of all this debt, or a major cause of all this debt? How many trillions have we spent in these wars now? These never-ending wars? We're going to do a separate show on World War II, World War I, how the two of them were tied together with Wilsonian interventionism. But folks, that's what got us into this mess. Wouldn't have been possible, by the way, without the GOP, the party of Lincoln, by turning us into one united state. We tried to leave, just going back to what Mark was saying. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave.
And what did the founders fear just about the most?
A standing army in time of peace. How do we avoid that argument? Let's just not have a time of peace. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump said that the 20th century saved freedom. I'm tying this into World War II. Ron Paul says that the 20th century has been, and he's right, the deadliest century in the history of our world for humanity. And it is no coincidence that this coincides with the creation of central banking. Do you see where we're going with this? Now, the 21st century, we're going to have a new standard of living thanks to our federal government. Tell me we are not a socialist nation. This goes back to the New Deal. That wasn't socialism. Now we have a New Deal investing in our cutting edge technology. And if you think the New Deal was oppressive, you wait till the new Green Deal takes effect. That's a matter of time. One thing that really struck me last night was watching the absolute hatred in the faces of these people. And not only the Democrats. Did you see Mitch McConnell, by the way? You filthy, ungrateful pig. Trump gave his wife a job.
Suzanne, tell us how you really, really feel about him. I mean, don't hold back.
Please do.
Trump gave his wife a job, endorsed him in the election, and this is how he behaves, even admonishes him and threatens him, hey, we might not back your wall, by the way. See, I think Trump made a huge strategic error in trying to bring these people in and endorsing them, endorsing Mitt Romney, because all they did was stab him in the back. He should have just absolutely ignored them, refused to work with them. I think the American people on both sides of the aisle would have cheered him thumbing his nose at the establishment. That's what got him elected. And what did he do? He turned around and brought him in and tried to work with them. So we're getting more of the same. So again, going back to the 20th century apparently saved freedom. He paraded these World War II vets and Holocaust survivors. Nobody is saying these veterans were not heroes, what they did. Interestingly enough, when he asked, why did they do it? To save us. No, they were drafted. Yes, many people volunteered, but you cannot say people did it for a greater cause when so many were drafted, which is, by the way, unconstitutional. Speaking of wanting to be left alone, the day my kids turned 18, guess what was in the mail? Draft registration cards. You cannot check out. You cannot leave. They demand that you be available to pay in blood for non-defensive wars. So again, absent Wilsonian interventionism, these World War II vets would not have had to make that sacrifice. Those Holocaust survivors wouldn't have been put in the camps because Hitler never would have risen to power. There's a great book called The Century of Warfare. We're going to be going through that as well. And also, if the war was really about freedom, why did FDR hand over half of Europe to freaking Stalin? You cannot say in good faith that that war was about freedom when half of Europe went behind an Iron Curtain. Am I wrong here, Jeff, Daniel?
No. Well, FDR was always enamored with Marxist philosophies.
As was Lincoln. As was,
right.
Read the book Lincoln's Marxist by Donald Kennedy. Or Ronald. I kept the two mixed up. They're twins, but we're going to be going through that book as well. So I saw a lot of lies, and I don't think they were intentional. I came away with the impression, I think Trump is a good guy. I think he really does want the best for American people. I think he really does want to work with the evil people in both parties. And his message was conciliatory towards both. We need to work together. Are you going to go for greatness with me? Or are you going to work against me and ultimately harm the American people? I think it was really scary, and where they really showed their true colors too was the reaction when he proposed a ban on late-term abortion. The anger in the faces of these women, what they're really saying is, we demand the right to murder viable babies. And this, to see how angry they were at the prospect of losing that right. Now, this is the party that claims to be the champion of the oppressed, the champion of the disenfranchised. Who is more vulnerable? Who is more disenfranchised than viable human beings? They just can't vote, but their moms can. That's what it really is about. So again, abortion, I have never argued for a national ban on it. It's not within the providence of the general government, absent a constitutional amendment. Again, it's not a political issue. It's a humanity issue. Again, the life of the unborn is not a humanity issue, but healthcare, the right to, let's see, free education, the right to jobs, the right to recreation, going back to the New Deal, the second New Deal. Those are human rights, but humans don't have rights. The unborn humans don't have rights. Daniel, why don't you read your State of the Union before you go?
All right, hold on. I got the music queued up. And Daniel, when you think you should be speaking, just wait just a second longer.
Okay.
I'm going to play the music. Here it comes, I hope.
All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to address both houses of Congress. It is an honor and great privilege to be able to address you all at one time in a joint session such as this. I imagine I will not receive any applauses for what I am about to say. The state of our union is inexorbitantly broken. We are divided beyond repair on both politics and culture. We currently are staring at a $22 trillion worth of declared debt. Debt that this Congress has allowed to rack up by continuing resolutions and failure to manage their own books. We also have $46 trillion of unfunded liabilities. These would include Social Security and Medicare. These two combined come to a total of $68 trillion in debt. We are currently also fighting 3 undeclared wars in 3 different countries against foes that have no way of coming over here if we fixed our immigration policy correctly. Our armed forces are stretched well beyond belief. Our borders are the scenes of great humanitarian crises. All of this is the result of laws passed by the past Congresses. The people are constantly being run roughshod over by federal courts that constantly and consistently overstep their authority under the Constitution and override the very people's wishes who they are supposed to protect. The Supreme Court and their subordinate courts have shown a complete disregard to the wishes of the people and have at times even overridden their popularly elected state constitutional amendments, all under the guise of equality. The courts are supposed to protect and defend the people from abusive governmental actions. Instead, they have thrown in with the government mismanagers. The inaction of this Congress and past Congresses has resulted in the greatest genocide of the innocent in human history. Currently, we stand at just under 60 million souls brutally murdered, stolen and murdered before they could even take their first breath. We have surpassed the amount of death brought to the world under Adolf Hitler. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not an issue of women's rights. It's a matter of right and wrong. Either murder is wrong or it isn't. I believe it is wrong and needs to be treated as such. I call on Congress to immediately pass a bill recognizing the soon-to-be-born as a citizen and person under the law. Due to the inability of Congress and the Senate to follow the Constitution and to protect the people from further abuse by government handlers and unelected bureaucrats, I hereby call on all 50 states to immediately invoke Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution and call for a convention of the states to amend the Constitution to protect what is left of our freedoms from both the courts, the Congress, and the executive. If any state believes it is better to try and go it on their own, instead of trying to fix this broken system, I wish you farewell and hope we can continue to live in peace and trade freely with each other, as we have always done heretofore. Good night, and God bless.
Wouldn't it that would have been really nice to hear? You know, the thing is that struck me last night when he called for that law is I don't know why he didn't do that when, again, we're working within the parameters of this being a post-constitutional society. Okay, so just forget the Constitution. It's a dead letter, and I know people don't like to hear that, but at no point were any of these policies that he was talking about, other than those dealing with foreign governments, none of these were within the purview of the delegated powers to the general government. So I see, imagine now, if we do not decentralize, if we do not get away from Washington, D.C., these people that you saw, the likes of which in their little white outfits, acting like absolute clowns, are going to be ruling your very community. There is no escape unless we decentralize. How is that ever going to happen unless we teach the truth about history and the right to leave Washington, D.C., to leave the auspices of Washington, D.C.? Daniel, before we went on the air, you were saying you blame the states for where we are right now. Why don't you expound upon that? Because I think it's a very important sentiment.
The states consist of 50 individual legislatures. These 50 individual legislatures have the ability to meet in convention at any time, at any place, for any reason which they see fit. Here to date, none of the 50 states have gotten up to, I believe it's 32, to come together to actually call for a convention. It only takes 32 or 34 to call for a convention. And then it takes, 3/4 to ratify an amendment. They could literally meet in convention and completely do away with the federal monstrosity. It would take them 30 seconds to do this. They've chosen not to. They've chosen to sit back and keep collecting the fake fraud money that they keep getting from the federal government. They are more than happy to keep abiding by their tyrannical overlords as long as the gravy train continues.
This is why it is so important for people to understand the reality and the truth behind secession and nullification. These principles, we were, again, founded as a system of federalism. Federalism has unfortunately become synonymous with nationalism, and we've tried to explain this concept to people. Again, a federal government and a system of federalism is one that has adequate resources with which to fulfill specifically enumerated and limited powers. Nationalism is when you have a strong central government in which these states are subservient to that general government's power. That was rejected outright at the Philadelphia Convention. It was never even submitted to the state legislatures in the ratification convention. Yet, thanks to the work of the likes of Alexander Hamilton and John Marshall — by the way, Dave Benner and I are going to do a show about Alexander Hamilton and John Marshall, who were present at the Virginia ratification debates, or John Marshall was present at the Virginia ratification debate, and went ahead and in his court subverted this federalist system that we had, thanks to the Supreme Court. I encourage people to read the book. If you don't want to read the book Government by Judiciary by Raoul Berger, read Dave Benner's book Compact of the Union and his little booklet 14th Amendment and the incorporation doctrine, and you're going to see how the federal judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court, which was intended to be a check on federal power, has failed in its obligation to do that very thing. And that brings me to what I've always said, that the Constitution is really a Trojan horse, because it relies on the government being limited and restrained by this fallacious notion that somehow three branches of what entity are going to restrain its own power. The founders and the ratifiers understood that it was up to the states to do this. So what has happened? This goes back to the Whiskey Rebellion. We talk about this all the time. George Washington was under the obligation to seek the permission of the Pennsylvania governor before going in there to collect this tax. Yet at that time, Alexander Hamilton, went into full general mode, took off his Secretary of the Treasury hat, put on a made-up Secretary of the Defense hat, and marched in, and Washington showed the other states, you better capitulate, or we will march in with the might and mighty force of the federal government and compel you to pay our taxes. I think if the communication abilities had been what they are now, there would have been a mass exodus from this newly created government. What say you, fellas?
Well, I don't know if anyone ever caught it. At the end of the Hail to the Chief, I put a little Easter egg in there I put the Three Stooges, and that's the reason I put that, because the Three Stooges were at the State of the Union address. You had the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. The Three Stooges were there, and they were wearing their costumes, acting like the Three Stooges. And I say this tongue in cheek, and with a little humor in there. But in reality, that's what we have. We have the Three Stooges that are going to try to rule everything in our lives. And it really does go back to the very beginning. Within 4 years, the Constitution was already being ignored. And then you had in 1798, you had got the Alien and Sedition Acts. It was dead within a decade of its ratification. And yet today, people keep saying, we just need to get back to it. They couldn't even do it, and they were there when it was made. That's why our solution is a peaceful separation. Do either of you have anything in common with those ladies wearing white?
No.
Neither do I. And it has nothing to do with the gender.
No.
or lack of gender, or the 21 genders, or whatever they want to say.
Oh, you're making my head hurt, Jeff.
You know, a couple things really before we run out of time. There was they mentioned an ICE agent who apparently had a raid where I think he saved 300 women and young girls that were being transported. Not once was there a smile that cracked the faces of those women in white. Just pure hatred you can see on their face. Didn't care about those women being saved whatsoever. But again, they cheered their own success. So here are women that were saved from a very perilous situation, but they didn't care about that. There's a hierarchy. I'll get into that on another show because I want to raise another issue, and that was the blatant disrespect. There was one gentleman, and I don't know who he was, but as Donald Trump was walking in, he had his hands behind his back and did not even reach out or acknowledge President Trump. And again, how hard is it to just be a decent human being and shake a person's hand? Don't be there if you can't at least act with a modicum of respect and decency. So then we had Nancy Pelosi sitting behind him in plain view, texting, ruffling through papers, sucking on her dentures or whatever the heck she was doing, being absolutely disrespectful, absolutely rude, distracting intentionally. Now remember back when Obama was having his State of the Union speech and he was lying. And I forgot who the guy was. I think it might have been Joe something, but he called him out during the speech and said he was lying because he was. Oh my gosh. The media exploded with self-righteous indignation. That was so rude. How could he be so disrespectful to a president? Now look at their behavior. Not only are they disrespectful when they demanded respect when their guy was in office, but again, look at the calls to violence with Maxine Waters telling people if you see Trump supporters or anybody in his administration, you call them out, you tell them they're not welcome. And we've seen that happening in restaurants now. We see calls for violence. We're going to take it to the streets with these people.
How come there hasn't been any criminal complaints lodged against any of these people calling for violence? I was pretty sure there was multiple federal laws that says you cannot do that.
Well, and look at Sarah Palin, who was excoriated for having, you know, an image of a rifle scope targeting people. So, you know, the enemies, we have the double standards. We recognize the hypocrisy. What I'm trying to tell people is, look, thanks to the trifecta of evil, which I mention all the time, the government, the media, and the entertainment industry, the education industry. I tie the media and entertainment together. So we have the government, the media, and education systems, industries, keeping us dumbed down, keeping us stupid. We talk about this all the time. I don't care how many people I know are homeschooling right now. We are never going to be able to compete with the compulsory government education system and the lies that are being told to our children as they are raised. We've all seen examples of the school literature comparing conservatives and progressives. Conservatives are relegated to they're castigated as racist. They like times from years gone by, traditional values. They're for guns, and then they talk about the progressives. They're about equality. Equality, Tom Woods has said, is the deadliest idea to ever come across humanity. And absolutely, you cannot compel equality without some significant violence. So where are we headed? These people expected Hillary to win. She did not win, but thanks to, again, bipartisan support, a dumbed down population, a media that is really nothing more than a branch of the Democrat Party, it is a matter of time. What do you think it's going to be like when those people in the white outfits and their male supporters are in charge of both houses and the executive branch? Well, I'm not even concerned with the judiciary branch because, 7 to 9, those justices giving us Roe versus Wade were appointed by Republicans. What do you think when they got the House? What did Maxine Waters, again, I keep quoting her, say? There's going to be payback. Oh boy, howdy, will there be if we lose the Senate, if we lose the House, if we lose the White House. This is why getting out from under their thumb is not only a matter of political expediency, but I submit to you, our very lives are going to depend on it. I'm going to let you two wrap up the show because I kind of dominated here. Oh, and by the way, did you see the look on Kamala Harris's face? God help us if she wins the 2020 election. Go ahead.
Hi, Daniel.
Making my head hurt. The problem we're facing is we can blame it on the media. We can blame it on government. We can blame it on anything we want. The problem isn't any of those, actually. The problem is that Christians have forgotten God. Bibles aren't taught in school because Bibles long ago ceased to be the centerpiece of the Christian home. Prayers were done away with in public school because prayer was not taught in the Christian home. If you want to return the country to what it was, you want to get back to morals, then you're going to have to get back to morals in the home. We can't keep blaming everybody else for our problems. We need to fix the problems in our homes.
I think it's too late for that. I don't care how many people embrace their Christian values and demand that our representatives respect them as well. I'm really thinking, for those that think we can get back to the Constitution, how are we ever going to do that when the people that take an oath to uphold and defend it don't even know what it means? I refer, again, I talk about the so-called constitutional expert Antonin Scalia, who couldn't even get the Second Amendment right. I hold him accountable for the reason we're having all these gun control laws right now, because everybody's citing Heller celebrating our gun rights when he left the door wide open for anything other than a handgun really to be banned. Rather than this is what happens. Well, we don't call it a restriction. We're totally out of time. I think we're going to do another show tomorrow. So on behalf of Jeff Johnson and Daniel Bailey here at the Cerberus Radio Network, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm Suzanne Sherman. Thank you for listening. God bless you.